Interesting facts about the Bible, part 111. Did you know that Yeshua tells us exactly how to enter through the narrow gate? And it is actually different from what most people believe it is. Matthew 7:13 through 14 tells us, "Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and those who enter through it are many. How narrow is the gate and difficult the way that leads to life, and those who find it are few." Many people believe all it takes is faith in Yeshua and nothing else to enter in through that gate. But Yeshua himself tells us something very different. In that same chapter, Matthew 7, Yeshua explains in verse 21, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name and drive out demons in your name and perform many miracles in your name?' Then I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Get away from me, you workers of lawlessness.'" Now, many translations purposefully translate that word lawlessness as iniquity. But that word in Greek, anomia, that is used, literally means being without law. Now, when Yeshua says, "Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name and drive out demons in your name and perform many miracles in your name?' Well, it takes faith to do all of those things. It takes probably love and faith to prophesy in his name and drive out demons in his name and perform miracles in his name. The average person can't do this. So this requires a lot of faith and probably love in order to do these things. Yet he will say to them, 'I never knew you.'" So clearly it's more than just faith that we have to enter into that narrow gate. He specifically says, "Those that do the will of the Father in heaven." That means those Old Testament laws that were given by his Father in heaven that everyone has been taught is no longer relevant. We're no longer under the law because of things that they have read in Galatians. Many people will tell me, well, Galatians says this and Galatians says that. But Galatians and all of the rest of the works of Paul and those underneath him were written by Jews for Jews using language that Jews understand. Even the Gentiles that were coming in were converting into Messianic Judaism. When people tell me that Paul says that we're no longer under the law, we no longer have to keep it, he actually isn't saying that. He's saying the opposite. In fact, he says many times to keep the law. So does John in the New Testament say to keep the Father's commandments. Now, Paul does not disagree with Yeshua. He is, in fact, a true teacher of Messiah. But if he were to have said to stop keeping the law, if he were to have said you no longer have to do what Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh and Yeshua themselves have said to do, then he would be a false teacher. He would not be of God. No one has the authority to undo what God the Father or the Son has commanded. And so Yeshua says in Matthew 23, starting verse 8, "But you are not to be called rabbi, for one is your teacher, and that is Yeshua himself." That means nobody else is an authority over Yeshua's words. And then he says, "And call no man on earth your father, for one is your Father who is in heaven." That means nobody else is a leader or authority figure in the church to undo anything that the Father or the Son has said. So that early church fathers expression should be a warning sign to begin with. So back to Matthew 23:8, Yeshua is our rabbi. The Father is our Father in heaven. They are the ultimate authorities. He wasn't saying you can't call somebody a rabbi or a father. He was saying that no one is above these two. Your pastors, your religious leaders, anyone that you respect as a religious authority, they cannot add on to the scriptures. They can only point to what the Father and the Son has taught and lead you to them, clarify those words, but they cannot change them. They cannot say, now we don't have to do those things, when Yeshua clearly says, "I am your rabbi. Your Father in heaven is your authority." No one is more of an authority to undo what they have said to do. Yeshua says that the gate that leads to destruction is wide and broad. That means that many people are going to be deceived and it says that few find the way that leads to life. But Christianity in general has been one of the leading religions in the world. So how could it be that there are those who find it that are few in number? It means that even though some may claim to be Christians, some may claim to be followers in Messiah, they are not doing what Messiah said to do in order to obtain life. 1 John 5 explains this beautifully. We know that we love God's children by this, when we love God and obey His commandments. For this is the love of God, speaking about the Father, that we keep His commandments, and His commandments are not burdensome. For everyone born of God overcomes the world, and the victory that has overcome the world is this, our faith. So faith is tied with keeping God's commandments, because it takes faith to keep these commandments. Faith that God is good, that His ways are good, and the things that He tells us to do are right and good. And I've heard people say keeping the quote-unquote law leads to hell. What an awful thing to say about God's own commandments, God's own ways, to say that keeping the good things that God has commandment leads to hell. And so we do not keep God's commandments to earn our way into heaven. If you're trying to earn your way into heaven, or you're afraid of hell, your heart is in the wrong place. We do these things because we love God. Yeshua says, if you love me, keep my commandments. And His commandment was to keep God's commandments. Many will say, well, do I keep all 613 commandments? There was never 613 commandments for one person. If you study the law because you find value in it, you'll understand it is not burdensome, just like John said. It's actually a great blessing to keep His ways.